It is the middle of the week, which means you're welcome for getting my face 3 times so far. Got more going on, more news happening, and we got an existential question of the day, as always, which is ground beef just scrambled steak? Just think about it. It's kind of like scrambling an egg, but in meat form. And eggs technically aren't meat. Are eggs meat? That'll be a future existential question of the day. Don't answer that one. Answer, is ground beef just scrambled steak? Or as they call it in South Africa, mince. I'm sure they call it elsewhere in the world mince, but that was my first exposure to calling it mince as ground beef.
Well, it's minced up.
Yeah, no, I get it's minced meat. I understand why it's called that. It was just a cultural barrier for me to realize, oh, you guys don't even call it ground beef. It's just not a thing. Let's go ahead and talk about the latest news going on with Crysis. Yes, my friends, you might think you're out of the woods of the joke of can your computer run Crysis? Well, I have news for you. First off, that was never a joke. Your PC always sucked. Number 2, your PC sucks even more because there is so much evidence going down for a Crysis Remaster with ray tracing. We talked about this over on our Hot News channel a couple weeks ago. Crytek released a showcase of their new engine, and towards the end of the video, they showed off this beautiful portion that was the original Crysis, but rendered with ray tracing and all of the new effects. And there's been some more activations happening that make it seem like it's all too likely to come out. Number 1, they reactivated their Facebook page after a couple of years. Now, number 2, as of yesterday, they reactivated their Crysis Twitter account, tweeting for the first time since December 13th, 2016. The first tweet was receiving data, and then the second tweet was, hey Nomad, you're still with us? So, all likelihood, this is going to be a Crysis Remaster and maybe not a Crysis 4. However, on top of that, there have been job postings put out by Crytek to work on an unannounced AAA title, as well as develop cutting-edge particles and on-screen effects, as well as a senior rendering engineer who will focus on real-time ray tracing for the CryEngine team in our Frankfurt studios. So it's very likely that they're developing ray tracing in their engine. We've seen it in the Crytek showcase. There's a lot of indication that's going to be a Crysis Remaster with all of the glorious goodness of ray tracing that will melt your PC. So even in 2020, as the world is falling apart, we can continue to ask the question, but can it run Crysis? And the answer is going to be no for the majority of you. You think your 1060 is going to run Crysis? Ha! Used to, not anymore. One of the big updates that everybody's looking forward to with a Crysis Remaster, though, is the fact that it's finally going to support multi-core rendering instead of single-core rendering, which is a big bottleneck on the original game, which is why even now it's really difficult to run, because even if you're running on a Ryzen 7 3700X, you're not using those 8 cores. There are patches and workarounds to get through that, but that involves modding the game, the original game, in its stock standard version that you can pick up on, let's say, Steam, is very still difficult to run. So hopefully we have Crysis Remaster upping the game of what games are supposed to look like in this generation, and then upping the game of what GPUs we need to run that, and then we see NVIDIA and AMD come out with absolute behemoth graphics cards that put everything else to shame, make it so that we forget about the disappointing 16 and 20 series, we forget about the fact that the RX 580 has been out for more years than it should have been, and then we go back into realizing that games are now demanding better hardware instead of hardware outpacing our games. That's the future I want to live in. That's not the only older game that's getting worked on, because NVIDIA and Mojang have announced the release date for Minecraft RTX, and that is going to be tomorrow, April 16th. You will be able to play the RTX beta of Minecraft, which makes it so that the blocky game that could run on basically everything, including potatoes, can now only run on the highest end hardware to make it playable. However, this isn't the only way that you can get ray tracing Minecraft. In fact, we did videos on this last year with not just NVIDIA RTX cards, but we were able to play ray trace Minecraft with AMD cards. You can do it with the 580. You can do it with the 5700 XT, thanks to some modders who have actually programmed all of this in. You can go support them on Patreon, and they've actually improved things since we did a video. So let me know if you guys want us to check out another showcase of ray tracing on AMD cards in Minecraft using the updated patches and path trace global illumination that they've developed. Let me know down below in the comments if you want to see that. Let me know if you're also going to utilize RTX with Minecraft once it drops. It's also going to include DLSS 2.0, which is cool. It's a new feature that NVIDIA announced a couple weeks ago, talking about how it's not going to be as bad as the original DLSS, which makes it so that you're smearing Vaseline on your eyeballs and your screen. and supposedly it's running faster, but you know, does it really matter when your eyes are all mushy from the Vaseline?
If I close my eyes, I can't tell how fast it is, so it works.
But if you close your eyes, then you have Vaseline on the inside, so you reduce the friction, so you can move your eyeballs back and forth a lot faster.
Yeah,
it's genius. Gotta go fast. But we went fast with Pokemon. We never knew what we couldn't have had because there was a hacker who dove into all of the Nintendo secrets, the Game Freak secrets, and found out that there was a long forgotten stuff going on with Pokemon Pink. We could have had it. It was supposed to launch alongside Pokemon Yellow, but they decided just to launch Yellow by itself. It's kind of like Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. It was supposed to be the Yellow Pikachu, and then Pink, either Jigglypuff or Clefairy. My guess would be Jigglypuff because that was more of a mainstay in the show. I think that's Clefairy makes kind of sense, but Jigglypuff had a bigger part in the show than Clefairy did, so my guess is they would have marketed towards that. But not only was there details of Pokemon Pink in this, but there's also some indication of different naming schemes that would have been for the Pokemon, as well as prototype towns that never made it into the original game. So get this, Vulpix was originally supposed to be called Foxfire, and Rapidash was supposed to be called Gallop, but take this one, Rattata, or Rattata, however you want to say that, was originally supposed to be called Kurativar. So there's that. A lot of weird, good information coming out about these old school Pokemon leaks. It's maybe not anything that matters today, but it's something lighthearted to keep your mind off of the world as it currently is. And that's what Sony is also trying to do with their Play at Home initiative, giving out free games to anybody who is on the PS4 until sometime in May 6th. They're giving out the Uncharted collection, the Nathan Drake collection, as well as Journey to all PS4 owners until May 6th in North America. And then there's other regions that are getting Knack 2 instead of Uncharted. I guess there might be licensing issues.
Sorry, guys.
Germany and China are getting Knack 2, whereas the rest of the world is getting Nathan Drake collection. But all of them are getting Journey, which we talked about in yesterday's episode of Hot News. You can get Journey on Steam in June, which is going to be exciting. Well, let's bring it back to some tech stuff, some hardware things, because TechSpot actually just released a really, really cool article that I'm going to encourage you guys to go take a look at. We're not going to delve into this super deep right now, but it's just kind of a chart and a history of GPUs over the last 12 years since kind of 2008, showing how GPUs have gotten more efficient, how they've gotten denser. There's a cool chart that's showing NVIDIA's main GPUs showing changes in transistor density over the years, as well as comparing TDP versus die density. It's a whole like retrospective that's really cool. Check it out down below. It's a bit detailed for what we do here on Hot News, but I highly encourage you to check it out, which you might also want to check out this next product that we're going to talk about, which AVerMedia just announced, but you also might not want to because it's a little weird. Has some cool feature sets. So we're going to talk about some streaming hardware. It's AVerMedia. That's what they tend to do. It's the world's first external 4K HDR and 1080p 240 FPS capture box. So it's external. You can pass through 240 frames per second. You can record 240 frames per second. The caveat to all of this is that it runs on Thunderbolt 3. It doesn't run on USB 3.2 Gen 2 by 2, however you want to say that, or PCI Express, which I think would make a lot more sense. This is basically forcing people into using Intel with this box, or that weird ASRock board that came out that was the X570 that had Thunderbolt 3 integrated with it. Unless you're getting that mini ITX motherboard, or you're with Intel on Thunderbolt 3, this is weird. This is a very, very weird choice, especially considering that a lot of gamers and streamers are switching over to Ryzen, especially for their streaming setup, maybe not for their gaming setup. This would go into the streaming PC, and the streaming PC wouldn't have the Thunderbolt 3 port. So AVerMedia, I'm not sure what you're doing. Really cool product. It's kind of pricey. I think it comes in at $450, which makes sense. It's an unprecedentedly cool thing, but why Thunderbolt 3? Unless they're getting paid Intel money, which case, I mean, I'd take Intel money. Intel, you want to give me money? I'll shill for you. I'll shill for you so hard. But Huawei is not going to shill for TSMC any longer. There's been a lot of reports about the US government trying to force TSMC into not selling their fabrication facility space to Huawei because the US government disagrees with Huawei and how it's connected to the Chinese government. Well, Huawei has said, fine, we're going to move our 14 nanometer stuff over to SMIC, which is the Chinese Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation, which we've talked about recently, is planning on going into 7 nanometer production later later this year, but they're not there yet. TSMC is still handling the 7nm stuff for Huawei, which is in their phones currently. Most of the phones are on 7nm already. They were one of the first to transition over there. So it's not affecting everything, but I suspect that when SMIC is very readily able to handle 7nm orders, Huawei will also shift over to there so that they don't have to deal with the complicated politics of getting a US government to ban a Taiwanese company from trading to a Chinese company.
You're not my dad!
And that's what Google's also trying to avoid. Maybe not the China stuff, but just dealing with companies. They're done. They're done with Qualcomm. They're done with Intel. Pathetic. Apparently, as early as next year, they're going to be developing their own SOCs for not only their smartphones, so the Pixel 6 will likely have a Google processor, but also for Chromebooks. So they're looking to develop their own ARM processors under the codename of Whitechapel, and it's apparently going to be ready for launch sometime in 2021, so we could see everything coming out with them. Google's not a stranger to developing their own hardware, obviously. They led the way when it came to tensor processing units, as well as making developments for their Pixel visual core that was in their Pixel 2. So they've done like sub SoC development before, so having a full SoC by Google wouldn't be anything new. However, it would mean that they're very heavily competing with Apple in this court and making their own stuff, which, kind of cool. But since we're getting more selection in phones, you probably want more selection in PCs. You want new processors, you want new GPUs. Well, apparently there's some indication coming out from HP that they have several products using the ZhaoXin, I can't pronounce these words, I'm sorry, but the Chinese branded VIA CPUs that are in other things in China. Well, now HP is using them for some of their Linux-based PCs that they're going to be releasing. They have this one, which is the HP 268 Pro G1, and they're bringing more options out to the consumer for you. And TSMC won't be able to do that as soon as they thought, because their 3nm production, just like Samsung, is now reportedly going to be delayed by at least 6 months, given supply chain constraints and all the difficulty that they're having with lockdowns happening worldwide. It's making it very difficult for them to move on to a new node. With that being said, 5nm is still apparently going to be on track. They're on schedule with production at full capacity. Don't worry about 5nm. That should be in the Apple iPhone 12. That should be coming out later this year. So TSMC good for 5nm. 3nm might have to wait until 2022. And you won't have to wait much longer to get NBC Universal's Peacock streaming service, which is going to be the exclusive home of The Office in January of next year. They're now rolling it out to Comcast Xfinity X1 and Flex customers today for free, and then they're going to be rolling out it completely on July, but they were supposed to launch that with the Tokyo Olympics, but now they're not doing that because NBC had the right to the Olympics, but the Olympics obviously is delayed till next year. However, the Peacock streaming service, you can pay and get ads, or you can pay and not get ads. It's a weird situation with that. What's also weird is things tracking you in your house, because MIT has developed a wireless box that can detect Voldemort patients' movements and breathing at home to make sure that they're okay. So the reason they're doing this is for telehealth purposes. If somebody's already been confirmed to have had a Voldemort encounter, the nurses and doctors can check on who they are and how they're doing at home while making sure that their vitals are okay. It's kind of weird, kind of invasive, but I would actually really appreciate some sort of this type of technology being applied to like epilepsy, because if I could put like a box in my son's room and know when he's having seizures at night without actually having to physically monitor him, this is obviously a bit different than like doctors and nurses situation, but that would be phenomenal, which I'm not sure if it would be as easily as detecting respiration, but I like that this kind of remote monitoring stuff is just happening because you put a box on a wall and it keeps track of everything. It's kind of invasive, but also could have really cool implications later on. Also could have really horrific implications later on, but let's not get into those. Let's stay happy in this episode of Hot News, which you got to be happy when you think about ground beef, because it's one, delicious, but also two, might just be scrambled steak. What say you? Ground beef, scrambled steak? Let me know down below in the comments. That's gonna be it. I'm done. I'm gonna go scramble my brains with video games. Goodbye. Stop vibrating. Break my brain. No. Stop it. Stop it!